Hey everybody, it's Winston and welcome back for another video. And today we are going to talk about Beltane. Some of the things that I do for Beltane and what I've heard other people do for Beltane. I know this year is very difficult for a lot of pagans because right now, being in quarantine, we aren't allowed to celebrate the Sabbats together, especially Beltane. Beltane's a huge one, and it's big about community, and I know I've heard of the parties that go on during Beltane, but right now we have to practice it from home, and I know some people who are doing certain Beltane things over like Skype or Zoom or any other social media. I know particularly me and my witches are doing something all together. We have a project and we have a ritual that we're all going to be doing for Beltane, and so that's part of the thing that I'm going to show you today. But first, let's get into what Beltane even is. So it's one of the Sabbats one of the 8 Sabbats that witches follow. Not all witches follow the Sabbats, but some do. It's a very big thing in Wicca to follow the 8 Sabbats, and it's that time of the year as the high point of spring into the beginning stages of summer. And it's all about, new beginnings, fertility, the growing season. And so a big thing during this is actually a lot of love spells will happen through this, and a lot of passion spells. So fire is a huge part of Beltane. People have huge bonfires out at gatherings, and it's all about all the candles and anything to represent the element of fire during Beltane. Another thing about Beltane is it's one of the there's 2 major times of the year where the veil to the spirit world or, other connecting with entities is the thinnest. The other one would be Samhain, which is for the northern hemisphere, is in October or around the time of October. But currently in the southern hemisphere, I believe it is Samhain, if I have that correct. There's a lot of, ancestry work that is done during this time as well, because it's easy to connect for some people during this time of the year. And that's just a couple of the things that people do. I mean, there are entire rituals. I have, the 3 major books that I follow in regards to Beltane, or any of the 8 Sabbats that I've gotten a lot of information from. One would be the Witch's Bible. It's a complete handbook for, practitioners of, I don't want to say it's for people who practice Wicca, because it doesn't directly, at least that I've seen, it doesn't directly reference Wicca in here, but I would assume a lot of witches who do practice Wicca would have something adjacent to the Witch's Bible. So there's a lot of information in here, and it has the 8 Sabbats and some of the history behind it and the lore behind it in here. So I use this as a reference book for that. I also have the Modern Witchcraft Guide of the Wheel of the Year by Judy Ann Knock, and it's a super simple book to read and very easy to follow. Even in here, they have a couple different spells or rituals that you can do with different potions, different recipes for here, specifically for Samhain and the other, not Samhain, for Beltane and the other, Sabbats in here. So this is also great reference books that I use. And then my last one is, which I've recently gotten, and I've paged through it, and I've specifically looked at the chapter of Beltane, and it's the Witch's Wheel of the Year by Jason Mankey. I've met him in person, and he's a fantastic teacher. I love a lot of his books because they're super easy to follow, super easy to read, great information, and he does have a more modern way of looking at Wicca and witchcraft in general. And so a lot of his terminology is more modern, which makes it easier for the next generation of pagan and witches to follow. At least for me, for being part of the next generation, it makes it easier for me to learn more about the history of it and some of the practices, and then how we can incorporate it into modern day life. So Jason's always a good author. I love his books, and I love his workshops as well. But for this year, what I'm doing for Beltane particularly, I know some people have an altar that they specifically set up to Beltane and to represent the goddess and the horned god and their unity as such. But I do not have a Beltane altar set up. Maybe it'll be something I do in the future. Currently, no. I don't necessarily have the space for it right now because I have currently 3 altars. I have one that is specific towards my deities, and then I have another one that is specifically towards the elements and keeping those in balance, and then I have one as a coven altar for the witches that I am in a coven with. And so those, I mean, that's 3 spots already. I live in a 1-bedroom apartment, so I don't really have a bunch of space. Like right now, I'm in my bedroom. This is where I have my crafting desk, and this is where I do a lot of my crafting spells and such. So one of the things that we are doing for Beltane is a little project to make an incense particularly centered around relationships and love and protecting that bond that you have. So the super simple recipe that I've seen many people use. It makes sense for me to use it. I like to do as much as possible by hand. So I try to get as many dried herbs that I can, especially from like pagan sourced places. You know, where we live right now, in Wisconsin, there's a great store who carries a bunch of bulk herbs, Aurora's Apothecary. They have a couple different stores, one in the Fox Valley. They have another one, I believe, in De Pere. There's talk about a 3rd one. But she's great. The owners are great there. I would recommend anybody who's in the area to go there and get herbs. They have candles, stones, books, tarot decks, oracles, jewelry, and they even have like a little bar where you can make your own lotions and your own essential oil mixtures, different stuff like that. Fantastic, all around great place, and they're very knowledgeable about the stuff that they do. They even have classes for herbalism there. But to get back into what we're doing, so some of the herbs that I got here to make an incense cone. This particular incense cone, like I said, is going to be dealing with relationships, in particular to our coven that we have going on. And so what we have here, I've already ground up some cinnamon. I had cinnamon chips, and then I ground them up into a powder as much as I could with my trusty mortar and pestle. I have another one coming that's going to be bigger and easier to work with. So I have that. And then another thing that we have is rose petals. And rose petals, of course, we all associate with love. It's also with an element of water. And what I do with these are dried. These came actually from a Lupercalia ritual that I did this year. Since Pan is one of my deities that I work with, Lupercalia is a Roman festival, and it's honoring Luperci, the kind of beginning of Rome, and love and passion and sex, fertility. All of that goes into it as well. But also Faunus, or Pan in Greek, is one of the deities that is worshipped during that time as well, because he is a fertility god. And so that's what these rose petals are for. So I'm just shredding these by hand and letting them into the mortar and pestle, because that'll make it easier to just kind of incorporate them and grind them into the mixture. The rose petals aren't the easiest to grind, obviously, unless they're like bone dry. They do not grind the most fantastic, but you work with what you got. Another thing about all these ingredients, I personally love to work with something I can grind in a mortar and pestle or just work with a little bit more. It helps focus my intent personally, but you use what you got. That's the fantastic thing about this, and I will always, always, always say this about paganism and witchcraft, that it's always about your intent. No one has the same path, and it's all about what you do and what you believe and how you do it. So it's all about just your intent of the entire thing. So if you're using just powdered cinnamon, that you got from a grocery store, or you're just using anything, like maybe you can't find the next thing that we're having is lavender. If you don't have lavender, or you can't just get bulk herb, maybe just use the tea version, like a lavender tea, and use that as the lavender element to it. Rose, I know one of our people, she didn't have, I don't know if she had, I think she had rose petals. Nope, she had rose petals, but another thing that she added to incorporate the rose element was rose water as well. And so that still had rose, but it also had a liquid element, which is another part of this. So there's the rose petals that we're putting in here and shredding. I know, I'm all over the place when I try to do these videos, but hey, it's real footage. It's real stuff. This is how I would explain it to anybody, honestly. We also have lavender, which again is that love and relationship element. And another nice thing about this time of the year, love can be interpreted as many different ways, whether it be intimacy sexually with a partner, or love of self, friendships and bonds that we create. That's a big thing, especially with another thing that we're doing, which I'll explain later. I don't want to get ahead of myself. But the bonds that we create, we celebrate as well during Beltane. So I just added lavender, and then sage as well for protection and for that purity and wisdom. So we have that. I'm going to shred this a little bit more. This one is completely bone dry. Sage as well. And I think something I forgot to mention, the cinnamon, the reason that we even have cinnamon in here is because it's a fire element, or associated with the fire element, and there's passion that goes into it, and love, and it's associated with all these things, and success, and helping that. So just to help create our bond and keep it strong, that's why I chose cinnamon to be part of this incense. Okay, so now I have everything in my mortar and pestle, and what I'm going to do, I'm just going to grind it up, create it into a fine powder so that it'll help, you know, with the making of the incense. Of course, you want it to get as fine as possible. You have chunks in there, it's not horrible, it's just easier if it's as fine as possible. And I know some people, I personally don't do this because I'm very bad at it, but some people will only do their grinding clockwise, never counterclockwise, or they only have certain ways that they grind these, you know, whatever mixtures that they're making, because it helps with their intent. That's one thing I don't do. I don't focus on how I'm grinding it, I just focus that I am grinding it. So that's just one thing I don't worry about. Of course, it's for whoever's practice. What I do isn't going to be what somebody else does. And again, that's not the point of any of these videos. It's not for me to tell you what you need to do. It's for me to just share what I do, and we can all learn from each other, and we can all open each other's minds to learning different things or different ways of thinking that, hey, maybe something clicks, and somebody that I don't even know just shared information. I'm like, oh wow, that makes sense. That's the point of these videos, is that I'm just sharing. That's all this is. This is like story time, show and tell in school. Nothing crazy. It's not something super lectorial, and like I'm not gonna like lecture you on back in whatever AD. I don't know where I got that from, but I'm not gonna like give you these huge histories. These are short, sweet videos, just a little something something. Just a little project for the quarantine. So now that I'm done talking about that, this is all basically ground up now into a powder. There's a little bit of the rose petal chunks in there. But then what we're going to do next, this is river water that I've collected. I have a river that I have access to in the back of the building that I live. I also have the lake just in, you know, just like a block away from where I live. So I'm just gonna add a little, very little bit, because you don't want too much water. But what this does is it creates a muddy mixture that you can form into a cone. That's not good. That's not good. Whoops. That wasn't supposed to happen. But anyways, that's just life. Sometimes things fall off the table. So I have my mixture. It's not as good as I want it to be. There. So I just added a little bit more water to kind of just help bind it a little bit more. It's a little bit more muddy now. Okay, so I have the mixture, and this will be just like you were as a child. And so I have, it's just like a little mud, and I'm just going to form it into a cone as best as possible. And so you're just going to squeeze and squeeze, get some of that excess water out of it. It is a little bit messy, especially if you're doing this by hand, but that's part of the fun. It's getting a little messy, because you're doing this all for the purpose and the intent of really focusing on it, and that's why doing it by hand is fantastic, because you really do focus on what you're doing. Okay, and there it is. It's a little cone of incense. Now this is going to have to dry for, these don't just dry out right away. You're gonna need a while, so if you just let it air dry, you're gonna need a couple days for it to completely. I haven't done it, but I'm sure you could bake it at a very low temperature. And then from that low temperature, you just bake it at a low temperature. I am very bad at explaining this, but you bake it at a low temperature. That way it just helps evaporate the water in it. You can also, I'm sure, take a hairdryer to it, stick it in the microwave real quick, whatever you have available in order if you need it to dry faster or not. I do have one, however, pre-made. So this is a dried incense cone. This is the exact same mixture, and I just eyeball everything. I don't have any, I'm an eyeball recipe person. I don't have any 1 tablespoon of lavender, 3 rose petals that are medium sized. No, that's not me. That's not what I do. But it's already made, so it is pretty hard. I don't know if you can't hear this, but it is solid, it is dried, and all I need to do is burn it. However, I'm going to use this one. I have done it before. They do burn. It might take a couple lights. At least I haven't perfected how I make them yet, but it does take a couple lights for me to get them to burn all the way down. But they smell great. This particular one smells fantastic with the cinnamon, and the sage is like a very nice cleansing smell. But overall, it's just fantastic. And this is what we are using for Beltane this year to light during our ritual. And the ritual that we are doing specifically is a binding ritual, basically, to reference the maypole, because we don't have access to a maypole, especially when we're all apart. And big thing about a maypole is, in Jason Manicky's book, he describes it as a binding ritual to bind the past and move towards the future. He doesn't exactly quote it that way, but that's the essence of what he's talking about. So you're letting go of the past and moving into a new cycle, which, going into spring and regrowth and rebirth and all of that, it makes complete sense to me why he describes it that way. So we're doing a specific binding ritual with 3 pieces of string or cord, and we're going to be braiding them together to represent us, 3 different colors to help represent our deities that we work with. And we're going to braid them together. So we tie at one end, braid, and then tie at the other. And then during our ritual, we have an incantation that we will be using. And I have it written down somewhere. I'm the one who made the incantation in the first place. But we are going to tie 3 knots into this cord that we make. And the incantation goes, by the power of 3, by the power of 3, I can't actually remember. I'm totally blinking. I know that's the way it starts, and I know how it ends. But, oh, yes, I remember now. Sorry about that. By the power of 3, I join with thee. Through grace and friendship a coven be. So it's an incantation that I made. I like rhyming. It helps me focus, and doing that as a chant really helps me channel my energy. And so since I was in charge of the Beltane this year, that's what our incantation is during this chord, during this binding ritual that we're doing. Since we're all apart, we're going to strengthen our bonds, and then we're going to set these cords on our altars to just represent the coven as a whole and our bond together. So, by the power of 3 I join with thee, through grace and friendship a coven be. And we're going to repeat that with each knot that we tie. And that's our basic binding ritual. It's something super basic, something super that we have, easy access to, and it just, we do whatever we can because not everyone has the access to the same equipment. We luckily all had the string and the 3 colors to help represent this. We luckily all had the same herbs, and I always check with my people to make sure that we all have the same things. Otherwise, I'm going to change it so that everybody can do it together, or we're all going to work in some way that we want to make as much unity in the group as possible. And I even asked them, before I even started talking about any of this in this video, I asked with them, is it okay if I share this? Because that's very important to me, is that we're all on the same page, and that, some things are going to be sacred that we don't share with just anybody. Certain things that we have just in our coven that are going to be super sacred, like things that, some deity work, I won't share, because that's between me and my deity, or one of our deities. And, that's just sacred stuff, and that's okay to have those moments that you don't share. And those moments that you don't share are going to be very important. Then there's going to be things that you want to share with everybody, like this. I made sure it was okay that I shared what we were doing tonight. And then, just share with you, this is something that we're going to do. Simple, something we can all do apart, but still be unified. And hopefully you guys get something out of this, or maybe it gives you an idea of what you want to do for your potential rituals in the future. And again, like I always say, this is what we do. This is what helps us. This is how we focus our intentions and our energies into our craft and our beliefs. And I am happy to learn from everybody else what they do with their beliefs, and that's why I have so many books. That's why I read so much, and that's why I like, learning from other people and their practices, or just talking, just like having a conversation and listening to whatever everybody else does. So hopefully this gives you a little insight into my world of witchcraft and you get something out of it. And if you have anything you want to share, I'd be more than happy to listen and, take information from that. So you can always comment on any of these videos, or, try to send me a personal message, and I'd be more than happy to discuss anything. But that's going to be it for today. Again, these videos are super raw, unedited, because, let's be real, even though we're in quarantine, I still got a lot of other stuff I need to do. But I'm happy to share everything, and it makes it super genuine as well. But I hope you join me again for another video, and I hope you have a fantastic and blessed Beltane. Thanks. Bye.